Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video we're going to build the watch that you see here. That would normally have a 7002 movement in it, but we're going to put in an NH35. I'll go through everything I think you need to know if you want to upgrade from the 7002 to the NH35. For this project though, we're going to be building this watch totally from spare parts. And here I've got everything we need to get this little project underway. What prompted this video was a watch I built a few years ago before I started this channel, and it's been one of my more popular videos and I've had a lot of questions about this watch. I'll leave a link at the end if you want to check it out. So I thought, why not do another build, and I can show you how I go about doing this movement upgrade. It's also a great excuse to bring another old SEIKO dive watch back to life. Here we have a beautifully patinaed 7002 7000 case, complete with bezel, crystal and case back. Got a brand new set of hands. I've got the white lume because that's going to match the dial we're going to use. And most importantly, here's the NH35 movement. I'll leave a link in the description for where I get my movements from. But remember, you must get a movement that has a date wheel fitted to it that suits a case with a 4 o'clock crown. And you'll need a NH35 specific stem. This one actually came with the movement. I just want to take a second to explain something quickly for those people that might not be 100% aware to the relevance of the crown position in relation to what date wheel has been fitted to these movements. The NH will generally have a date wheel to suit a watch that's got a crown at what they call the 3.8 position, like a SKX or the SRPD. So if you're going to put one of these movements into a 7002, you need to have a date wheel that allows for the fact that the crown is slightly lower on these models at the 4 o'clock position. Otherwise the date isn't going to line up in the date window. I hope that sort of explains the subtle differences in the cases and why it's important to get the right movement. Okay, back to business. The dial I'm going to use is from a 7020, which I had left over from another project, showing just the right amount of wear and tear for this job. And I just happen to think this is one of the nicest dials SEIKO made at the time. But anyway, that's what I've got, so that's what I'm going to use, and that's why I grabbed the white hands. The hands, the date wheel and the dial should all sort of match. So we've pretty much got all original SEIKO parts. Going to very much have that vintage SEIKO vibe to it by the time it's finished, which is something I like. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I like to leave these older watches as found. I think it's cool that they've got a bit of character to them. And yes, I'm fully aware that the style's from the 7020 that has the tag Hoya style bezel, but I've always wanted to see how it would look in the 7000 case with the black bezel. Just got to get all these parts cleaned up, ready for the final assembly. Noticed that the click ball's missing, the spring's jammed in the case there, but the tube looks okay. So I'll organise a new click ball and spring. That way we've got it when we get around to putting everything back together. Let's start by having a look at what parts we're going to need. If we're doing the conversion, new parts, we're going to need our NH35 movement, and we're going to need a stem to suit the NH35 movement. The parts we'll be reusing will be all the case components. We'll be reusing the dial. We can use the old hands. Now the crown, if we can get the crown off the old stem, we'll reuse that. If not, you can grab yourself an aftermarket crown that would suit an SKX, and you reuse the dial spacer, but we'll talk about that later. And if you're building the watch from scratch, you're obviously going to have to source everything that I just mentioned to make sure you can build the whole watch. I'll just show you how to remove the stem from this movement. If you have a look closely here, you'll see there's a lever with a little indent in the end of it, so just gently push down on that lever and that'll release the stem out of the movement for you. Right, now first order of business, we need to trim a little bit of material off the movement holder on either side of where the stem goes through. I'll just take a measurement of the slot in the movement holder and a measurement of the tube, the crown tube in the case. You'll see why you need to trim the movement holder. That's the piece that I've trimmed off one side, and you're going to trim the same off either side. Barely a millimetre needs to come off either side, just to allow room for that movement holder to get around the tube. Now if you're working on an existing watch, your movement setup's going to look something like this. You've got your dial spacer and your movement holder. On the new movement, the dial spacer and the movement holder is all one piece. I should be using an original dial. You'll have your two dial feet there, and they will locate in two corresponding holes in the new movement. Just need to line the dial up in relation to the stem, and the dial will fit in just like it did in the old movement. I'm just going to show you the measurement we've got on the overall thickness of the original assembly, and we'll get a measurement of the overall thickness of the new movement with the dial fitted. Now the difference between the two assemblies comes in at around 1/2 mm or 20,000ths of an inch thinner than the original movement. This measurement will be relevant a bit later in the build. Here I'm just lining up the date at midnight, getting ready to fit the hands. The hands off your old movement will fit on the NH35. As I say, I grabbed these. I got them in the white because they will match the date wheel, and the dial originally had that white loom as well. Fitting up the hands is fairly straightforward. If you haven't fitted hands before, go and check out one of my other videos or someone else's. There's plenty of videos on YouTube on how to fit hands. If you already know what you're doing, you can skip this bit or go and grab a beer or a coffee. I bought this new tool to fit the hands, and to be quite honest, I don't really like it. I prefer to use the manual tools to put the hands on, so I think I'll be going back to my old way of doing things. Righto, time to get the movement cased up. Now we already know that the movement's going to fit in the case because we trimmed that movement holder off earlier on, so that should fit in without any problems at all. So with that done, we can get on with one of the most important parts of the build and one of the trickiest, and that's cutting the stem to size. Here's a closer look at the stems, the old 7002 and our new NH35. You'll see that the NH35 is quite different, and that's to allow for the hand winding function of the new movement. I'm using an aftermarket SKX crown because it looks the same as the 7002 and fits this case. It's worth a mention the 7002, 7S26 and NH35 stem threads are all the same, even though the stems are different. Now I haven't cut anything yet. I'm just going to screw the crown onto the stem and put the stem into the watch, just so I can get a measurement to compare to a finished stem and crown assembly. Couldn't help myself, I had to dig out the 7029 just to give you a look at this magnificent dial and what it looks like in mint condition. I'm just going to use this watch for demonstration purposes and to get some measurements. Screw down dive watch crowns are spring loaded so that when you undo them they actually pop out from the case, leaving a clearance between the crown and the crown tube. And this is what we're going to need to replicate. I'm going to be doing the measurements in metric. You could do it in imperial if you like, it doesn't really matter. So we've got 1.5 mm or thereabouts, so I'm just going to take a note of that. Now we'll have a look at our uncut stem. We're going to take a measurement between the case and the back of the crown, and we've got 8.39 mm. Obviously we subtract one from the other and that gives us a measurement which will give us some idea on how much we need to cut off the end of the stem. Now we're going to need to remove a little over 5 mm to get this stem down to where we need it, but we're going to work very conservatively. So we're going to mark that and we'll cut it well shorter. Now I'm just using a pair of side cutters. It's the easiest way to cut these stems. Then we'll clean the thread up with a file so we don't run into any problems screwing the crown on. I've got a pin vise here, which is handy if you've got one. If you haven't, it doesn't really matter. You just hold it. You want to get that end of that thread nice and flat. And then once you've got that nice and flat, you'll want to put a little bit of a chamfer around the edge just to clean the thread up. It'll be a bit rough because you used side cutters to cut it, but that's what you want it to look like when you're finished. I'm going to take an overall measurement now of the cut down stem, and we'll use that measurement from now on as a reference because we're going to be taking a little bit off at a time. We may do this 2 or 3 times. Better that than if we take too much off, it's just going to end in tears. So we'll screw the crown back on the stem, just snug it up, we don't want it too tight. Stick it back in the movement and we will see what our new measurement is. So taking another measurement, you can see we're at about, we're a bit under 3.5 mil. So we're still 2 mil over where we want to be, but that's fine. We only want to be taking a little bit off at a time and then rechecking our measurements. If you take too much off, you've ruined the stem and you're going to have to grab another stem and start again. So go through the process again. I've trimmed a little bit off, or file it again so that we don't cross thread it when we screw the crown back on. I'm going to measure it again before I put it together so we can see how much we've taken off. We know what our measurement was before. Now we're down to a bit under 14.5. So we've removed roughly 0.5 mil. It is a bit of a process, but you're better to do it this way. Try it. Take a little bit more off, try it, take a little bit more. You'll be surprised how much of a difference it makes when you get down to the final tolerance or clearance. Even just a bit of filing can make all the difference. So it's just the safest way to do it, trust me. Still need a bit more to come off.
A few moments later.
A little bit more filing and we are right where we want to be. If you remember, our original measurement that we were sort of looking for was 1.55, 1.54. So yeah, pretty happy with that. When you release that crown off the crown tube, you want it to pop out just enough so there's a little bit of clearance there so that when you're winding the watch, it's not catching on the tube. Our stem's all done. We can put the crown on permanently now. So I use 2-4-3 Loctite. You want something that'll hold it, but you also want something that'll come undone if you ever need to remove that crown again. Now that's all the hard work out of the way anyway. Now the next part of this little upgrade is, I'll say it's somewhat optional, it's up to you, but I'll show you what I mean. What I'm measuring here is the distance between the back of the movement holder and the base of the case. It's about 2 mil, and here I'm measuring the part of the case back that goes down inside the case and holds the movement holder in place. Now you can see we've got 1.5 mil, so we've got a difference of about 0.5 mil, which if you remember just happens to be the difference between the thickness of our new and old movement assemblies. So ideally we need some sort of spacer to make up the difference. Now the movement sits fairly snug in the case and you could run it without a spacer. I think I've come up with a pretty easy solution that's worked for me, but it's entirely up to you whether you want to worry about it or not. If you go and dig out your original dial spacer, you'll notice that it has a step on it, and the step on that spacer is about 0.5 mil and is very close to the diameter we need to fit in the back of the watch. As you can see here, I just sat the spacer on a flat surface with a really sharp blade and just gently took my time and went around and trimmed that top section off.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
And there you have it. Still needs a bit of finishing off, but you get the idea. If I place it in the back of the watch here, you'll see it fits in quite well, but it does touch on the rotor. So I just need to increase its diameter a bit so it's snug up against the case and gives us the clearance we need. Now, how I got around this was I added about 1/8 of an inch or 3 mil into the spacer to increase its diameter by cutting it and using a soldering iron, melting in some plastic off the end of the stem that came with the NH35. The blue area you can see obviously being the bit I've added, making it a really snug fit in the case, and with a bit of a trim you end up with just the right amount of clearance around the rotor. Here's a before and after of our original dial spacer and the new piece that we've made. Just having one last look at everything. That spacer looks pretty good. Check the crown's working nicely. Very happy with the clearance we ended up with on that crown. Winds like a dream. Everything else is working as it should and screws back in nicely. Yeah, very happy with how that's come out. And you can see that rotor's moving quite freely. We've got just the right amount of clearance there. When we do the case back up, that's going to be snug as. Nothing in there is going to move. Now you may have your own ideas on how best to deal with that 1/2 mil gap, if you even bother, but that's how I did it. As for the upgrade, we are pretty much done. Case back is on, and that's about it for this part of the build. I'll just show you everything's working before we move on. So our first position is the quick set on the date. Second position activates our hacking function, and our date's clicking over right on midnight. Now that all looks good. While we've been working on the rest of the watch, I've had the parts turn up for the bezel. I've got a gasket, a clip ball and a spring, so we can get that bezel sorted out and back on the case. Then we'll whack the watch up on the time grapher and see what sort of numbers we come up with. I've tried to cover everything in this video so that you can have a go at doing this yourself. I'm pretty sure I've covered all the important stuff and given you a pretty good insight into what's involved. Well, here's the watch on the time grapher, -5 seconds. It's fluctuating a little bit, but this movement hasn't run. Look, I mean, I reckon after a couple of weeks of running, I think the movement would probably settle in. I haven't touched it, and you could always regulate it if you wanted to, but I think that's pretty good. Loom on the dial's gone. It's long gone. It's just the way it is with these old dials. But the hands look good, and the bezel pip's still working. I'm pretty happy with the build overall. I love the look of this watch. This dial bezel combination works really well, I reckon. And obviously it's got the NH35 in it, so you've got your hand wind and your hacking and just a great movement. Yeah, like I say, I love putting these new movements in these old watches, so that sort of wraps it up for this video. I know it's been a long one, but we had a lot to cover. If you're thinking of doing something similar, I hope you got some ideas, maybe a little bit of inspiration. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I thank you for watching.